Hey there. Ready for a journey of transformation?
That's exciting.
Today, we're diving deep into the practice of Great Lent
Ah, Great Lent.
in the Orthodox Christian tradition. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second,
Okay.
I'm not Orthodox Christian. Is this even relevant to me?
Right, right.
But stick with us.
Yeah.
You might be surprised
Yeah.
to discover just how much this ancient practice has to offer, no matter your background.
I think that's true.
Think of this deep dive as a map to a more fulfilling life.
Okay.
We're going to use the principles of Great Lent to help you get there.
That's right. We often think of Lent as simply giving things up, chocolate, social media, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But at its core, Great Lent is about so much more than just deprivation. It's a journey of spiritual renewal, a time to shed old habits
Right.
and cultivate new ways of being.
Our guide for this deep dive is an article from the Orthodox Christian Tools blog.
Oh, yeah.
It paints a really vivid picture of this journey. It explains that Great Lent is part of a larger season called the Triodion season,
Okay.
which lasts a full 10 weeks.
Exactly. It's a gradual process, a thoughtful build up to Easter,
Right.
beginning with preparation, then the 6 weeks of Lent itself,
Yeah.
and finally culminating in the intensity of Holy Week.
So it's not just a sudden plunge into intense fasting and reflection.
Right.
There's a rhythm to it, a sense of gradually deepening your commitment.
I like that.
Now let's talk about fasting,
Yeah, fasting.
which is often what comes to mind when people think of Lent.
Sure, sure.
The article really emphasizes that fasting in this context
Uh-huh.
is about so much more than just food.
It's about shifting your focus from the external to the internal.
Okay.
It's a way to create space in your life,
Right.
both physically and mentally, to reconnect with what truly matters, your values, your relationships, your sense of purpose.
So it's not just about saying no to certain foods,
Right.
but about saying yes to something deeper.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that idea of creating a hunger
Okay.
for something more meaningful in our lives.
That's a great way to put it. And the article highlights
Yeah.
a powerful verse from the Gospel of Matthew.
Yeah.
Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.
Right.
It's a reminder that there's sustenance beyond the physical.
And you know what's interesting?
What's that?
The article connects this idea of fasting back to the story of Adam and Eve
Oh.
in the Garden of Eden. Their sin was eating the forbidden fruit, right?
Yeah.
So fasting during Lent
Mm-hmm.
becomes a symbolic way of abstaining
Okay.
from those things that tempt us away from what's truly good for us.
Exactly. It's a way to reclaim our freedom, to choose what nourishes our soul,
I see.
rather than simply giving in to every passing whim.
I like that. It's not about denying ourselves for the sake of denial,
Yeah.
but about consciously choosing what we allow into our lives.
Makes sense.
Now, the article also delves into some of the benefits of fasting.
Oh. And they're not just about weight loss.
No, of course not.
For example, it suggests that fasting
Okay.
can lead to a deeper, more focused prayer life.
Think about it.
Right.
When you're not constantly preoccupied with food
Yeah.
or other physical cravings,
Right.
it's easier to tune into that quieter inner voice
Uh-huh.
to connect with something larger than yourself.
It's like clearing out the mental clutter
Yeah.
to make space for something more meaningful.
It's a good way to put it.
I can see how that could be really powerful, especially in our world that's so full of distractions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's more, right?
Oh, there's more.
The article suggests that fasting
Uh-huh.
can cultivate compassion for others. When you experience even a small degree of hunger yourself,
Okay.
it can make you much more sensitive to the struggles of those who face food insecurity on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's a reminder of our shared humanity, our interconnectedness.
It's like stepping into someone else's shoes,
Right.
even if just for a little while.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about how a physical experience, like fasting,
Yeah.
can have such profound emotional and spiritual ripple effects.
Absolutely. And one more benefit the article mentions
Right.
is the development of self-control.
Oh, okay.
When you practice saying no to certain foods or habits,
Mm-hmm.
you're essentially strengthening your willpower muscle.
It's like training for a marathon,
Yeah.
but for your mind.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that newfound self-control can spill over into other areas of your life,
Oh, interesting.
helping you make healthier choices,
Mhm.
stick to your goals,
Right.
and resist those impulsive urges that often lead us astray.
Now, the article quotes St. John Chrysostom,
Okay.
who said, fasting from food is important, but fasting from sin is even more critical.
Wow.
That really struck me.
Yeah.
It seems to suggest that the outward act of fasting
Uh-huh.
is only meaningful if it's accompanied by an inward transformation.
Exactly. It's a call to look beyond the superficial and examine our inner landscape, our thoughts, our words, our actions.
Uh-huh.
Are we harboring anger, resentment, judgment?
Okay.
Are we engaging in behaviors that go against our values?
It's like holding up a mirror to our souls
Yeah.
and asking what needs to be cleansed, what needs to be healed.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, before we dive into the specifics of the Lenten fast,
Okay.
let's talk about the 4 Sundays leading up to Lent.
Okay, the 4 Sundays.
The article describes them as a kind of pre-Lent prep,
Uh-huh.
each with a specific theme designed to prepare our hearts and minds for the journey ahead.
Yes. Think them as signposts,
Okay.
pointing you in the right direction.
Uh-huh.
The first Sunday, the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee,
Yeah.
is all about cultivating humility.
Humility.
It reminds us that a true desire for change
Okay.
begins with acknowledging our imperfections.
So it's not about pretending to be perfect,
Right.
but about being honest with ourselves about where we fall short. It's interesting that the week following the Sunday is actually fast-free.
That's right. It's a reminder that approaching this journey with a spirit of genuine humility is more important than rigidly adhering to rules.
Then we have the Sunday of the Prodigal Son,
Okay.
a story that beautifully illustrates the power of repentance.
It reminds us that no matter how far we've strayed
Yeah.
from our values or from our relationship with the divine,
Mm-hmm.
we can always turn back. We can always choose to make a new beginning.
It's a message of hope and forgiveness
Right.
that I think resonates with everyone,
Yeah.
regardless of their religious beliefs.
Absolutely.
And then we have Meat Fair Sunday,
Right.
which focuses on love and compassion for others.
It's a call to action, a reminder that our spiritual growth is inextricably linked to how we treat those around us,
Right.
especially those who are less fortunate.
And finally, we have Cheese Fair Sunday, a day
Oh.
dedicated to forgiveness.
It's about releasing the burdens of the past,
Okay.
both forgiving ourselves for our mistakes
Right.
and extending that same grace to others.
So these pre-Lenten Sundays are like a mini course in spiritual growth,
Yeah, I like that.
setting the stage for the deeper work of the Lenten fast itself.
That makes sense.
Now let's talk about the guidelines for the Lenten fast.
Right.
The article mentions that these rules were established by Orthodox monasteries centuries ago
Okay.
to guide believers in self-denial and spiritual growth.
But it's important to remember that these are guidelines, not hard and fast rules set in stone.
Right.
The focus should always be on the internal journey,
Uh-huh.
not on rigid adherence to external practices.
So it's about finding what works for you,
Yeah.
listening to your body and to your spirit, and adapting the practices to fit your individual needs.
Absolutely.
What are some of the general practices during the Lenten fast?
Well, on weekdays, meat, dairy, fish, oil, and wine are typically avoided.
But the weekends are a bit more lenient, right?
Right. Yes. Olive oil and wine are usually permitted on Saturdays and Sundays during Lent.
And what about special feast days that fall during Lent?
Yeah.
Are there any exceptions then?
Absolutely. Feast days like the Annunciation and Palm Sunday
Okay.
often have more leniency, allowing for things like fish, oil, and wine.
So there's a recognition that the journey isn't meant to be purely about deprivation.
Right.
There's a balance, a sense of celebration woven into the tapestry of Lent.
Exactly. And the article points out that the first week of Lent
Uh-huh.
and Holy Week
Okay.
are particularly strict,
Right.
representing a deepening of commitment as we approach the climax of the Lenten journey.
It's like the training intensifies as we get closer to the big race.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Now, I know some people might hear about these strict fasting rules and think, that sounds really difficult.
Yeah, I can see that.
But you mentioned earlier that the church emphasizes moderation and understanding.
That's right. The church recognizes that individual circumstances vary, and there's always room for flexibility and adaptation.
Right.
It's not about pushing yourself to the point of exhaustion
Okay.
or jeopardizing your health.
Yeah.
It's about finding a level of challenge that is both meaningful and sustainable for you.
So it's more about the spirit of the practice than the letter of the law.
Exactly. It's about aligning your outer discipline with your inner intention.
Uh-huh.
The goal is transformation, not punishment.
That makes a lot of sense.
Good.
Okay, so we've talked about the preparatory Sundays
Right.
and the general guidelines for the Lenten fast.
Yeah.
Now, let's move into Holy Week,
Okay.
the final and most intense week leading up to Easter.
The climax.
The article describes it as a time of profound reflection and fasting as we journey with Christ through his final days on earth.
Each day of Holy Week is marked by special services and readings
Okay.
that recount the events leading up to Christ's crucifixion and resurrection.
Right.
It's a deeply moving and emotional experience for believers.
And the fasting rules become even stricter during this time, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
For example, on Holy Thursday,
Yeah.
which commemorates the Last Supper,
Right.
wine is permitted,
Right.
symbolizing the sharing of the cup with Christ.
Right.
But then on Good Friday,
Okay.
the day of Christ's crucifixion,
Yeah.
a strict fast is observed,
Okay.
reflecting the somberness of the occasion.
And the article mentions a fascinating detail.
Oh.
Holy Saturday is apparently the only Saturday in the entire year
Wow.
when oil is not permitted.
That's right. It's a unique practice that underscores the solemnity of that day, as believers wait with anticipation for the miracle of the resurrection.
So there's a real sense of drama, of anticipation
Right.
woven into the fabric of Holy Week.
Yeah.
It's like the story is coming to its climax, and the intensity of the fasting mirrors that narrative arc.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then, of course, all of this culminates
Yeah.
in the joyous celebration of Easter.
The article describes the Easter midnight service as a truly special event,
Oh, yeah?
a moment of pure joy and spiritual release.
Right?
As the church erupts in the proclamation, Christ is risen.
Yeah.
It's the culmination of weeks of preparation, reflection, and fasting.
And the celebration doesn't end there. The week following Easter is called Bright Week.
Oh, okay.
And there's no fasting during that time.
Oh, wow.
It's a time to truly feast and revel in the joy of the resurrection.
It's like a collective exhale, a moment to savor the fruits of the journey.
That's a great way to put it.
And the article points out that the festive atmosphere continues even beyond Bright Week.
Oh, really?
The Paschal season, a time of thanksgiving and celebration,
Yeah.
actually lasts for 40 days after Easter.
It's a beautiful way to extend the joy and spiritual renewal that began with Lent,
Yeah.
allowing that energy to permeate our lives for weeks to come.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that idea of carrying the spirit of the journey with us even after the formal practices have ended.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to touch on a special prayer that's recited daily throughout Lent,
Oh, okay.
the prayer of St. Ephraim the Syrian.
Right.
The article describes it as a prayer that captures the essence of Lent, focusing on themes of humility, patience, and love.
It's a beautiful prayer full of wisdom and insight.
Mm.
Would you like me to share it with you?
I would love that,
All
and
right.
I'm sure our listeners would appreciate hearing it as well.
The prayer of St. Ephraim the Syrian goes like this.
Hmm.
O Lord and Master of my life, take from me the spirit of sloth, faint-heartedness, lust of power, and idle talk, but give rather the spirit of chastity, humility, patience, and love to your servant. Yes, O Lord and King, grant me to see my own sins and not to judge my brother, for you are blessed unto ages of ages. Amen.
Those words, take from me the spirit of sloth, really struck me.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think St. Ephraim meant by sloth in this context? Is it simply about laziness?
Okay.
Or is there something deeper there?
That's a great question, and I think it speaks to the heart of what Great Lent is all about.
I think most of us would agree that laziness isn't exactly a virtue.
Right.
But when I think of sloth,
Yeah.
I often think of it in terms of physical inactivity.
Okay.
But here,
Uh-huh.
St. Ephraim seems to be talking about sloth as a spiritual condition.
You're absolutely right. In this context, sloth refers to a kind of spiritual apathy, a lack of zeal for pursuing what's good and true.
Okay.
It's that feeling of being stuck in a rut,
Right.
of letting life pass you by without fully engaging with it.
So it's not just about being physically lazy,
Yeah.
but about being spiritually lazy as well.
Exactly. It's about failing to cultivate our inner landscape,
Okay.
allowing our souls to become overgrown with weeds, so to speak.
And the prayer goes on to ask for the spirit of chastity, humility, patience, and love.
Right.
These seem to be the antidotes to sloth,
Yeah.
the virtues that can help us cultivate a more vibrant spiritual life.
Think of it as a recipe for spiritual growth. Chastity, in this context, isn't just about sexual purity,
Okay.
but about directing our desires towards what's truly good for us,
Right.
both physically and spiritually.
Okay.
Humility reminds us to approach this journey with a beginner's mind,
Yeah.
recognizing that we always have more to learn.
And patience is essential because real transformation takes time.
Right.
It's not a quick fix.
No.
It's an ongoing process of growth and refinement.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, there's love,
Yeah.
the foundation of it all.
Without love, all the other virtues are meaningless.
Right.
Love is what fuels our desire to grow, to connect, to make a positive difference in the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks.
It's interesting to consider how these virtues,
Yeah.
which are often associated with religious traditions, can actually be applied to our lives in a very practical and universal way.
Absolutely. These are human qualities,
Right.
not just religious ones.
Right.
Whether you're a devout believer or a spiritual seeker, or simply someone who wants to live a more meaningful life,
Right.
these virtues offer a roadmap to growth and fulfillment.
So we've covered a lot of ground,
Yeah, we have.
talking about the meaning of Lent, the purpose of fasting, those insightful pre-Lenten Sundays, the guidelines for fasting,
Right.
and even the intensity of Holy Week.
Yeah.
But I think what's really interesting is how all of this applies to us, listeners.
Like the listeners.
I mean, why should we care about this ancient tradition?
Yeah. Good
Even
point.
if we're not Orthodox Christians.
That's a great question.
Oh.
And I think the answer lies in the fact that the principles of Great Lent, the ideas at its core,
Yeah.
are actually universal.
Okay.
They transcend any specific religion or belief system.
So it's not just about being Orthodox.
Right.
It's about tapping into something deeper.
Yeah.
Something that resonates with the human experience, regardless of your background.
Exactly. Take the concept of fasting, for example. Yes, it has a specific meaning within the context of Great Lent.
Right.
But the underlying idea of self-discipline and self-control is relevant to everyone.
We all have areas in our lives where we could benefit from a little more discipline, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's our eating habits, our spending habits, our relationship with social media, or even just our tendency to get caught up in negative thought patterns.
Absolutely. And fasting, even in a modified form, can be a powerful tool for cultivating that discipline.
Right.
It's about saying no to something in order to say yes to something else, to something more important, more aligned with our values.
So even if we're not giving up specific foods, we can still apply that principle of conscious self-restraint to other areas of our lives.
Exactly.
It's like choosing to create space, to simplify, to let go of what's no longer serving us.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key theme of Lent, reflection and repentance.
These might sound like heavy religious concepts, but they're actually very practical and beneficial practices for anyone.
Absolutely.
Regardless of their spiritual beliefs.
Right.
I can see that. I mean, who couldn't benefit from taking a little time to reflect on their life, to assess where they're at, to identify areas where they could grow or make positive changes?
Reflection is about stepping back from the busyness of life
Yeah.
and asking those deeper questions.
Okay.
Am I living in accordance with my values? What brings me joy?
Okay.
What drains my energy?
Right.
Where do I want to go from here?
It's about becoming more conscious, more aware,
Yeah,
both of ourselves and of the world around us.
exactly. And repentance isn't about dwelling in guilt or shame.
Okay.
It's about recognizing where we've fallen short and making a conscious choice to do better, to be better.
It's about course correction, about making adjustments as we go,
Yeah.
and being willing to learn from our mistakes.
And of course, we can't talk about Lent without talking about forgiveness. Both forgiving ourselves for our imperfections and extending forgiveness to others.
Forgiveness is tough.
It is.
It can be so challenging to let go of anger and resentment,
Yeah.
especially when we feel like we've been wronged.
It's true. But forgiveness isn't about condoning bad behavior.
Okay.
It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying those negative emotions.
Right.
It's about choosing to move forward with a lighter heart.
I love that image of forgiveness as a way to lighten our load.
Yeah.
We're not letting the other person off the hook. We're
Oh, yeah.
releasing ourselves from the prison of our own resentment.
Exactly. And, forgiveness is often a two-way street. When we extend forgiveness to others,
Yeah.
we create the space for them to forgive themselves, to grow, to change.
It's like we're planting seeds of compassion,
Yeah.
not just for others, but for ourselves as well.
I like that.
And that brings us to another core principle of Lent,
Okay.
compassion and love for others.
The Lenten season is a time to reflect on how we're showing up in the world. Are we living in a way that reflects our values?
Right.
Are we contributing to the well-being of others? Are we making a positive difference?
I think that's something we can all ask ourselves,
Yeah.
regardless of our religious beliefs. How can we be more kind, more generous, more compassionate in our interactions with others?
It doesn't have to involve grand gestures or heroic acts.
Okay.
Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have the greatest impact.
Like offering a genuine compliment,
Yeah.
holding the door open for someone,
Right.
listening with empathy when a friend is struggling.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that spirit of generosity and compassion in our everyday interactions.
So what you're saying is that even though Great Lent is a specifically Orthodox Christian tradition,
Uh-huh.
the principles and themes embedded within it can be applied to our lives in meaningful ways,
Right.
whether we're religious or not.
Absolutely.
It's about taking those core values,
Yeah.
self-discipline, reflection, forgiveness, compassion, and finding ways to weave them into the fabric of our daily lives.
All right. It's about using these 40 days as an opportunity for personal growth and transformation,
Okay.
recognizing that the journey doesn't end when Lent is over.
It's about taking those lessons we've learned
Yeah.
and integrating them into our lives in a sustainable way.
Think of it as a spiritual detox,
Right.
a time to reset and recharge, both mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is you don't have to be Orthodox Christian to benefit from it.
Now, the article ends with a thought-provoking question that
Yeah.
I think really sums up what we've been discussing.
Right.
How can we apply the principles of Great Lent, reflection, self-control, compassion to our lives even beyond the season itself?
Wow, that's a good one.
That's a great place to pause and give our listeners something to think about.
Yeah, I agree.
What are some practical ways they can integrate these Lenten principles into their everyday lives?
It's a great question. And
Yeah.
I think the key is to start small, to choose one area where you'd like to see growth and focus on that.
Oh,
Don't try to overhaul your entire life all at once.
right.
You know what I mean?
So it's like choosing a spiritual training plan.
Exactly.
Starting with a manageable goal
Uh-huh.
and gradually increasing the intensity over time.
Exactly. For example, if you're intrigued by the idea of fasting,
Yeah.
but the thought of giving up food feels too daunting,
Right.
you could experiment with a digital fast.
Oh, a digital fast.
Choose a specific time each day,
Okay.
or maybe even a whole day each week to disconnect from social media.
Right.
Turn off your phone
Okay.
and just be present in the moment.
I love that idea. It's like giving your mind a break from the constant stimulation, creating space for deeper reflection and connection.
Right.
I've been trying to be more mindful of my social media use lately,
Okay.
and I've noticed that when I step away, even for short periods,
Yeah.
I feel so much calmer and more centered.
It's amazing how much mental clutter we accumulate. When we're constantly bombarded with information and external stimuli,
Right.
a digital fast can be a powerful way to reclaim your attention and focus on what truly matters.
And speaking of creating space,
Yeah.
that brings us to another Lenten principle that we can easily incorporate into our lives.
Okay.
Rest and simplicity.
Lent is a time for slowing down,
Okay.
for simplifying our routines,
Yeah.
for creating space for contemplation and renewal.
Our modern world often glorifies busyness and productivity.
It does, doesn't it?
But true well-being requires balance.
It does.
We need time to rest,
Yeah.
to recharge,
Yeah.
to simply be.
Exactly. Even small changes can make a big difference.
Okay.
Instead of packing your schedule to the brim,
Right.
try to build in some downtime,
Okay.
even if it's just for 15 minutes each day.
A 15-minute break, I can definitely manage that.
Yeah.
What are some good ways to spend that time?
There are so many options.
Yeah.
Take a walk in nature, meditate, listen to calming music, read a book, or simply sit in silence and observe your breath.
Okay.
It's amazing how rejuvenating those quiet moments can be.
I find that even a short walk in nature can completely shift my perspective.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a mini vacation for my mind.
I agree.
Now let's talk about the Lenten emphasis on compassion and giving back.
Okay.
How can we translate that into action in our daily lives?
It doesn't have to involve grand gestures or huge financial contributions.
Right.
Remember, small acts of kindness can have a ripple effect.
So it's not about waiting for the perfect opportunity to make a big difference,
Right.
but about looking for those everyday moments where we can offer a little bit of kindness.
Exactly. Smile at a stranger, offer a helping hand to someone who looks like they're struggling,
Yeah.
volunteer your time at a local charity,
Okay.
or simply make a conscious effort to listen with empathy
Right.
when a friend is sharing their challenges.
I love that idea. It's about shifting our focus from ourselves to others,
Mhm.
recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions, no matter how small,
Yeah,
can have a positive impact on the world around us.
absolutely.
Now, earlier we talked about the prayer of St. Ephrem the Syrian,
Yes.
which is recited daily during Lent. Is there a way for our listeners to connect with that prayer, even if they're not familiar with Orthodox Christian traditions?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The prayer itself, with its focus on humility, patience, and love, is incredibly powerful and universal.
Okay.
You can easily find the text online or even listen to a recording of it.
And even if someone isn't comfortable reciting the prayer itself,
Yeah.
they can still reflect on its themes.
Right.
Think about those areas where you might struggle with sloth, anger, or judgment. Use the prayer as a guide for self-reflection and personal growth.
That's a wonderful suggestion.
Hmm.
It's about taking those words and letting them sink in,
Yeah.
allowing them to inspire positive change in our hearts and minds.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Great Lent,
Yeah.
I think the key takeaway is this. It's not just a religious observance.
Right.
It's a blueprint for a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
It is.
It's about embracing those universal values of self-discipline, reflection, forgiveness, and compassion, and finding creative ways to weave them into our daily routines.
It's about using the Lenten season as a springboard for personal growth and positive change
Right.
that extends far beyond those 40 days.
It's about recognizing that the journey of transformation is ongoing.
Yeah.
And that the principles of Great Lent can offer valuable guidance and inspiration along the way.
I agree.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to explore the richness of this ancient tradition,
Yeah.
even if it's just through the lens of these universal principles.
Absolutely.
You might be surprised at the transformative power it holds.
I think so too.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.